Kick it off.
Right. This week's topic, under the banner of Alistair's particular annoyances or interests, is this constant burden of reboots and remakes that covers Hollywood at the moment. It's something we can't really get away from. Even stuff that is relatively new is getting rebooted, and we don't seem to be able to get away from it. So it's... is it a good idea? Is it a good thing? Is it something that we should be happy with and just accept because they've always happened? Or is it something that we should be thinking, okay, we want something different now, we want some new ideas, we don't want to keep them? And first of all, I kind of want to look at the idea of like, what's the difference between a remake and a reboot? Now, this is something I was thinking about when I was thinking about this topic. My topic was reboots. And I thought, well, I was thinking of good remakes. I was like, I know good remakes, but I'm thinking, is there a good reboot? Like, what for you guys is like the definition of a reboot? Because for me,
a good reboot, Star Trek.
See,
Star Trek.
that's a good point, because I think if we can make the differentiation between a remake and a reboot, just for the sake of this argument, essentially, my definition would be a remake would be a film that takes the original source material, or a show that takes the original source material and brings it into a modern format. Essentially, so if I can name some... Let's name some good remakes. So I would say The Fly, the David Cronenberg film, based on like a 1950s sort of B-movie horror film. And it sort of turned it into this sort of terrifying body horror creepiness. Same with The Thing as well. By John Carpenter, which was actually my favourite John Carpenter film, and again sort of turned what was essentially like a sort of low budget B movie into a relatively high budget B movie, but still a lot of gory horror, and brought it into that sort of modern age of, I'd say, a golden age of special effects, where everything was plasticky and stretchy and gooey and exactly. So those are good remakes, but to define remakes and reboots, I'd say those are examples of good remakes where they took an original source material and brought it into a new age. Whereas I would say a reboot is where it takes a franchise and tries to reinvent it. Yeah. I don't think you can. I can't think off the top of my head something that's been rebooted where it's been one film. I think if it's one film, it's a remake. Is that right? Can we think of an example where one thing has been rebooted?
Yeah, normally, I mean, the idea of the reboot a lot of the time is if something's got...
It's to reinvigorate something, isn't it?
Like they do it in comics all the time, with a lot of the bigger film franchise. When something gets to a point where there's so much material there for people to like get in on the ground floor on, they're like, well, this is going to be too hard for people, so they reboot it. Yeah. So like you say, like all the Batman films, all the superhero films, like when they reboot those, there's never just one.
That's a reboot. That's what we would consider to be a reboot, because it's a series, and what you are doing is you're starting a new series afresh. And then if you think of superhero movies, I say capes because that's kind of a bit of a jargony sort of in the comics world of referring to superhero comics. Think of Spider-Man in movies recently. That reboot coming, what was it? It was only like...
less than 10 years.
Yeah, it was less than 10 years after Spider-Man 3 that The Amazing Spider-Man came out. And I thought The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 were utter failures. I don't know about you, but I thought they were...
I enjoyed 2.
I thought utterly vacuous, empty, boring, sort of trashy noise that just sort of... completely without like any sort of narrative.
I thought they were well cast. I just thought they were...
Garfield was a perfectly good Spider-Man and Peter Parker, but
The Amazing Spider-Man ones. I thought you meant...
No, sorry. The Amazing Spider-Man being rebooted after Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. I mean, because I'd say Spider-Man 2 is up there with the best superhero films, let alone the best Spider-Man films.
Yeah, that's what you meant.
Totally, yeah.
I tried to watch the first 10 minutes. Well, I was watching the first 10 minutes of Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Like, I can't watch this. This is god awful.
It's terrible, isn't it?
He's like, he was at graduation, and he was saying something like, "Oh, I wish Uncle Ben was here." I was like, "No, I'm out. This is awful.
It's typical, I think it's typical to drop that line.
I think that's a problem they had with it. Is when you're rebooting something, you have to redo the origin story, and redoing the origin story is something we mentioned the Fantastic Four, because that's getting rebooted.
Looks good.
Yeah, that looks kind of cool. Though. I mean,
you guys have both said that it looks good, but just because it doesn't look as good as the really, really terrible previous one with Chris Evans doesn't mean that it's going to be good.
My favourite film.
Well, the original Fantastic Four were pretty universally sort of hated.
Yeah,
and that came before everyone was loving superhero films again.
They were bad, man. They were bad. I think the only way you won't get a singular you won't really get a singular film gets rebooted.
So I think if we can define that makes sense, because then we can look at whether I think the question I'm trying to answer is, and it's a question that other people have looked at, but I think it's an interesting thing to sort of bring up as a sort of inaugural thing that we can all look at and we can learn something about all of each other, is whether we think it's a good thing, whether we think Hollywood's obsession with remaking stuff is going
too far.
Well, yeah, going too far, because I don't know whether anyone would really argue that it was a good thing, unless any of you think differently.
After you.
What? It's because all I'm thinking about is the new Star Treks, and I just think they are so good. They've done such a good job bringing that to the 21st century. I think that's brilliant.
I think the best way, when it's done right, it
brings a whole new audience.
Yeah, it brings a whole new audience, and it doesn't take away anything that happened before it. And that's what a lot of people get hung up on. Is no, you changing everything.
Yeah,
not
the same. That didn't happen. That wasn't the same.
Those stories are still there.
Yeah,
you can still go and enjoy those as
that's
much as you want.
Yeah.
Like,
I hate it when it's not replacing it.
Like the RoboCop, for example. Oh, no, RoboCop, it ruined the other films. It's like, it hasn't ruined the other films. They were made 20 years before. How on earth has it ruined those films?
I don't know. I can totally understand somebody saying that RoboCop has ruined the originals.
Man, there were much worse films that come out after RoboCop, like the sequels to RoboCop and that terrible TV series.
RoboCop 2 was okay. RoboCop 3 was the worst.
Yeah.
But the RoboCop remake, essentially what it did, worse than just being a shit sequel, was reinventing a character in a completely bland and forgettable way. Like a character who is sort of iconic, and trying to create it into something that is sort of boring and middle of the road and just to sell popcorn.
I disagree with that. I didn't like it the first time I watched it, and I've watched it a couple of times since. I think it does some things even better than the other film. I'm glad.
Like what?
Well, I'm glad it didn't retread old ground, because the first film was looking at sort of advertising, commercial culture and stuff, and this one was looking more at the implications of doing that to a person. And so I think the characters were a little bit... they're not as iconic and nowhere near, but they're a little bit more fleshed out. The film isn't as cool, though. I totally get that. The film is not as cool.
Would you consider that to be a reboot or a remake? Because essentially it's part of a franchise, but I don't think there's any plans to do a second one.
I don't think it will happen now. I think the film had more potential. Another thing that's stifling stuff is this culture of people being afraid to make films R-rated and stuff, which was a big effect on that film. I mean, the violence was a big part of RoboCop.
And Total Recall, if you remember. Yeah. That was a really dull remake of a really brilliant film.
I hate that. I hate how they've taken films and they've made them, less age rating than it's gory.
It's the logic behind it is... Well, you'll find this a lot with films. They stick to formulas because they know they work. That's why you have things like, even the way films are made, you've got this 3-act structure and everything's structured like this, and characters don't adventure out of there. But I mean, if a black guy's going to do this and a woman's going to do this, and because of that, people are basically looking to make sure they get the best returns on their investment, but it's having the opposite effect. They're making films that should be aimed at adults, aimed at kids, and they're using a lot of formulas from years ago, and this is what's actually bringing it back to this reboot and remake culture. This is kind of why I feel that this is happening as well, is because people are almost afraid to explore new ideas now because it's dangerous, because it costs $200 million to make a film. It's like, well, that's a new idea. What you need characters a black guy who's going out of a white woman. That's dangerous. Oh, you need characters. It's
a very strange attitude, considering that they've tried certain things in pretty much every respect. When they try new things, they do tend to work, especially with the inclusion thing that you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, when was Blade made?
98.
And a black main character in it, and it did really well. Spawned 2 sequels, one of which was terrible, one of which was better. Like, Blade 2 is amazing, Blade 3 is shit, but irrelevant in a way because they were both really good. So the inclusion thing's kind of a strange one. But to bring it back to reboots, I think when it comes to sort of in a way to sort of link it in, like people are being afraid of new ideas. Why do you reckon that is? I mean, it tends to be a lot of nostalgia properties, and I think it's just because that sort of thing is safe. Like you obviously can reference things that when we're children. I mean, we disagree massively on Jurassic World. I don't know your opinion, but we'll bring that up at some point. We'll discuss Jurassic Park because we've touched
Best
on
film
it.
2015 until December.
Okay, save it.
Yeah, we're saving it. We're saving it.
Save it.
But yeah, I think if there's a reason why they're remaking stuff consistently, it's because it's safe. And that kind of touches on what we were talking about with Nintendo, because Nintendo reinvention of their for information regarding this, check out our E3 podcast.
I'm not sure how much information's in there, but
check out the garbled melee that was our E3 podcast.
We'll put a link down there. Go look.
But we spoke briefly about Nintendo's
it'll be down there.
Nintendo's sort of reliance on their old characters and sort of inability to create new characters and so on, new ideas, new IPs. And it's a safety. There's a safety in your standard fan base who will always buy something with Mario's face on it. Will always be the same, the same people who will always buy the thing with, I don't know, the Jurassic Park logo on it, all the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, with Mario though, and all of those kind of things, I don't think they've ever actually rebooted it. It's all the same.
It's all the same
story.
That's a good point.
Exactly. Yeah, Princess Peach is going to get kidnapped. Let's face it.
Like they've rebooted like the format. Like they've changed formats and then gone back formats.
Yeah.
But
that's what's different about video games is they can do that. Like the story, I don't think has like with Zelda. I think that's all still the same story. They keep going back and forth in time, like putting it in different, like filling in the gaps.
They never go anywhere decisively and do anything which is what's happening in films actually. They get to a point, this rehash
Fast
culture.
and Furious, they do that. They go back and the timeline and that's all over the place.
You get this culture of you're remaking the same thing because it's safe, but then you're always afraid to do anything meaningful or decisive or big. Like you never see an Avenger get killed, or nothing decisive ever happens.
Spoilers.
Public trading companies, man.
Right. Has everyone seen Avengers here? Just to veer off briefly.
Age of Ultron.
Yes. Everyone's seen. Right. Okay. Spoilers, guys. You do actually kind of see an Avenger die in Quicksilver.
The most unimportant, is in the film for
It was teased heavily that Hawkeye was going to die.
Yeah.
And then they didn't kill him. I fully thought they were going to kill like a main character. I thought they were going to kill Captain America.
But they wouldn't because it's safe.
I don't know.
It's like they pandered to fans on like a little bit. Like it's like they made
Game of Thrones.
What's the word? Like you've instead of.
I'll never kill any main characters. Come on.
It's like they've listened to the fans and they've come to sort of like a halfway house and it's like, yeah, okay, you're right. You know, fucking. What's his name? Nick Fury has like died 4 or 5 times and he's come back to life again. You're right, it's getting ridiculous. We'll bring this character in. You can get to know him a little bit and then we'll just kill him off instead.
Yeah.
Right. So I think to sort of bring it back to reboots, if we've covered what we think is bad about the reboot culture, are there really any reboots that we think are good other than Star Trek?
I think we know what's good. Because would you want to see rebooted as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, because I would argue that the Star Trek is not a good reboot. Like, I would say that they are good films, but I would say they aren't Star Trek.
I totally disagree.
Because they don't seem like Star Trek at all to me. Like, everything is ramped up to 11. It's not in keeping with the sort of vaguely sort of somber tone of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like, I could...
I agree. It was a lot more mellow.
It's a reboot in a way, but in a way it doesn't really... Like, reboots still need to sort of keep to the
source material a little bit.
Not just to the source material, but to the general sort of tone. I think, like if we can agree on a good reboot of a series recently, a soft reboot, like I know only 2 of us have seen it, but Mad Max Fury Road being a good reboot because it keeps the tone, like it changes things up, it changes the actors, it changes the sort of setting in a way and updates pretty much everything about it, but it still stays the tone.
Yes.
Whereas Star Trek's kind of did something new. I mean, those films seem more like Star Wars to me, and that's why I think Abrams' Star Wars is going to be so good.
I think, though, what Star Trek feels to me like, it feels like the very first series of Star Trek, which felt like an episode, which felt like the old Sinbad movies. They felt like adventure films.
It feels new. I think
it feels really fresh. It feels really current.
I think the other Star Wars series that come out after the first
Star Trek.
After the first Star Trek series that come out after the first Star Trek series, they changed the tone and they went more serious and that. And that's when I lost interest in Star Trek. I always liked it, but it got a bit boring for me.
What, you didn't like Next Generation?
I liked it, but I ended up losing interest in it. It didn't keep me, I think I watched most of them, to be fair. But the very first series felt like the old Sinbad movies. It was just like it's Sinbad in space. It was just fun. Just a lot of adventure.
Without sticking too much to Star Trek, I think overall we've agreed that it's like they're fairly successful films. I mean, they've certainly reinvigorated that particular franchise. Abrams isn't sticking with it, but there is a 3rd film being made. I don't like Into Darkness. I thought it was a really bad film.
Yeah, I think there was more.
But I really like the first one.
I was going to say there's more at fault there than like the film itself was fine, but the script and the plot was.
Yeah.
Damon Lindelof, single-handedly ruining cinema is Mr. Lindelof. Oh my God! I could have a whole topic about save it. Mr. Lindelof.
As a games reference, one of the best reboots of all time is the new Tomb Raider.
Yes. Oh, totally.
Hands down. He's going to leave him hanging. Awkward. Whoa.
Fine.
Yes.
Oh, come on. That's your guns.
That is a kind of like, again, like a soft reboot. Like, they're not really changing too much about the character. And it's exploring a time that hasn't been explored in the previous games. Like, she's a lot younger than when it debuted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So really theoretically, it could be canon.
It's really quite clever because when I found out about it, and I found out that they were going to go right back to the start before she was a Tomb Raider, and take it from the first adventure that she goes on. You think like, well, is it going to follow the games then? It's going to be a totally different story. It's going to be a totally different Lara, but it worked so well. It was just brilliant. You couldn't.
Do you know what the reason that is? I think sometimes people are onto like a good idea, but even they haven't fully explored their idea properly, and then sometimes it takes someone else to come along and go, yeah, I could do something really good with this, and that's what Tomb Raider was. And so for a long time I was like, I hate reboots, but then something will come along and prove me wrong. So ultimately creativity should always be freely, people should be able to express it however they want. And it is frustrating that there's so much bad stuff you have to get before you get like a good thing, but the good things make up for it. Mad Max, Tomb Raider. I mean, it's hard to think of other really good reboots.
Well, I can think of good remakes, but thinking of good reboots is difficult. Reboots is essentially the topic, but I can think of good remakes. I could rattle off a few. Like True Grit is a brilliant remake.
310 Yuma.
That's really.
I haven't seen 310 to Yuma.
I'm not a big fan of like cowboys type films. Even I thought it was really good.
Have you not seen True Grit?
Only a bit of it. I haven't seen much.
Excellent film, and a really good reboot of remake of a John Wayne film. But it's based on the book again because I've read the book as well. But it's essentially a remake of the original.
We're going to see a lot more of it now as well, because the main reason stuff's getting rebooted, a lot of the reasons stuff's getting rebooted now is because the technology's there to make it better.
Yes.
Before you could have just rebooted something, but it's just going to be more of the same.
This is probably why a lot of this happened as well,
Yeah, and you've got obviously our generation that grew up in the 90s, you're going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff coming back now.
Yeah.
Like even irony of ironies, the CGI TV show Reboot
is getting a reboot. Yeah, I heard that.
Nice.
I heard that.
I personally am quite excited.
I've seen some depressing stuff and I've seen some interesting stuff. Like I saw a couple of clips from the new Thunderbirds.
Yep.
And I thought that looked crap.
The cartoon series.
No, it's not. It's CGI. CGI
looks like puppet.
Yeah, it's CGI. It's CGI
I've
mixed.
watched an episode actually. Yeah.
It's CGI mixed with
not as good as half stuff.
No, I don't know whether it can be unless they went
Part of the charm
fully.
was the puppetry.
Yeah, well, to bring it back to that, the Clangers has been remade, but remade with stop motion animation and with a voiceover from Michael Palin, and it feels true to the original.
Nice.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I guess children's stuff is kind of opposite to what we initially started talking about, like horror, like sci-fi films and stuff. We haven't even touched on the slew of every single horror film from the 80s. Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre has been remade twice.
So to sum
that
up
poor film.
So to sum up, the Shot remake of Psycho was the best remake ever.
The Gus Van Sant.
Yeah.
Oh my god. If we sort of go around to sort of wrap this one up, I think if we sort of suggest something that could be rebooted, like something that you feel like or rebooted or remade, I think. Because I'm going to go controversial here. I'm going to go for an absolute classic. If you guys all think of yours while I'm talking about this.
I've got mine.
No, you got yours. Are you all sorted?
Is it a game or a video? Game or
film? Film. Stick to a film, I think. But I'm going to go absolute classic and controversial. I'm going to say Labyrinth. I would say Labyrinth would be an amazing remake that I'd like to see. Like, people are going to say, okay, that film doesn't need to be remade because it's like sort of the legacy of Jim Henson, but Jim Henson's company still exists. You know, he could still use puppets. It could still use
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the last one he did, wasn't it? I think it was the last one.
But what, before he died?
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually don't know when he died, but I know that company still exists, and I know Frank Oz is still around.
Just a short segue that supports what you were saying as well. The animatronics and puppetry now has advanced loads, and I looked at when they remade the thing. It wasn't a remake; it was like a prequel. When they did that film, the puppetry and the animatronics looked amazing, and then they went and painted it from
they
digital.
didn't use it. Studio ADI. There's like the whole channel. Incidentally, if you haven't seen it, it's a channel called Studio ADI, and they worked on the original Thing. They worked on Alien. They worked on all sorts of amazing films, and they've used so many Tremors. But they've worked on so many brilliant films and loads of terrible films as well, but created amazing effects for them. And then you look at like the Thing remake, which has all these amazing effects. Plus Spider-Man with the Green Goblin was initially going to be like an animatronic sort of head, and the one they ended up using was just crap. And it amazes you how this sort of stuff kind of goes to waste, but they really could remake it. Was my point about Labyrinth, is they could really make something amazing out of it but still sticking to the original things. Yeah, and I think if you cast somebody, I wouldn't say Russell Brand, but like someone sort of the sort of fey charisma of somebody like David Bowie, like I would imagine they could find somebody who was
Johnny
similar to
Depp,
that.
but it sounds like it'd be very similar.
Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp would probably play it as Bowie, and he's been a little bit typecast.
Well.
I feel like you'd need a pop star, but that's not for me to decide.
Lady Gaga
could be the Goblin King. There you go. You heard it here first. Lady Gaga as Jarrett. That would be awesome. That'd be great.
There you go.
You know,
make it.
There we go.
Do it.
Make it. Right, remake.
My remake, I'll just be quick. Starship Troopers. I love that franchise.
I love that
But the film's amazing.
The film's amazing.
This is what I'm
but,
struggling with. I'm thinking of them.
I know,
Every single time
I
I think, but that's
a good.
classic.
Yeah, that because. Okay, so what would you do different? Because I think with my
technology's
Labyrinth
come along a
remake,
bit,
I think with my Labyrinth remake, I would try to stick to the original puppetry and stuff, but try and make it bigger. Like try and make the scope of it larger and more sort of in line with I don't know, like bigger fantasy series. And stuff.
Well, I think because obviously the way media is all integrated now with like games and comics and everything like that, relaunching that franchise, and you can have like a game behind it and like a comic series from like Dark
Would you do
Horse
it the
or
same
something.
as the original film though? The old film?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
or would you do it more like the book, which was more serious?
I don't know. You want a bit of a cross. I think there's room for it. I think we're starting to see more and more sci-fi slip through, especially with Star Wars coming back and stuff. I think there's going to be a core for that. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something with it. If they make like an actual sequel or some kind of soft reboot or a reboot soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, good franchise. I reckon that'd be worth doing something with.
I love
Nikita?
Starship Troopers.
I haven't got mine. Go to Luke.
Okay,
Keep thinking.
I'm trying.
See, don't forget, you can't, like, we've both gone for films that we really like. I love Labyrinth.
That's the thing, it's like
and Starship Troopers
You
is
know
amazing.
what? You know what? I was risking even thinking about, and it's a sore spot. But I just thought it'd be really cool with new CGI for Jumanji for some reason. But then I thought, but it's Robin Williams. And you can't. Nobody could do that.
Yeah, that's a
Nobody
difficult
could do
one
that.
when it's somebody so beloved at the centre of it.
Exactly.
It's a shame because
That's
it's a
kind
big
of a
universe. I think you could
difficult
explore with that, like, because of the whole game. You could get
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It could be. I mean, obviously
Like
they
the cartoon
tried.
series.
What was that awful one that bloody
Like the cartoon
Kristen
series.
Stewart was in? That was like that.
Sephora.
Sephora.
Yeah.
That was let's not do that. You know, but that
Apparently
was,
that was based on a book by the same author, so that's why they were so similar.
Yeah, well, that would make sense.
Zathura,
But, I mean, you could do so much more. I mean, everything was incredible within Jumanji, like the stampede.
Incidentally, Studio ADI worked on the physical effects in that film, i.e., the lion and the
Really?
and the crocodile. Yeah, they're worth looking up. They're really amazing, and they're also releasing a film soon called Harbinger Down, which is like this amazing sort of low budget horror film that they crowdfunded, and it like uses no CGI. So check that out. Looks really interesting.
Luke,
Brilliant.
quick, we gotta move on.
So I do you know what I had in my head all the way through? I was thinking, I'd like to reboot like He-Man, but now
because it's not. That would be a full-on reboot because they haven't really.
Yeah.
They did like one film with Dolph Lundgren, but they haven't really done anything with it recently.
That would be really
That's not a
good.
classic as well. Like all of ours are like kind of fondly remembered.
And the thing is as well with He-Man as well. Do you know what I love from the 80s, 90s cartoons? The bad guys and stuff. I'd love to put a bit of focus on Skeletor and make the bad guys not so weak, have a bit more power.